It never really occurred to me that my wife and I would have trouble conceiving.
Didn't even cross our minds in the slightest.
Having a child was the next logical step.
I didn't want to accept it at first.
I felt like it was my fault.
It hit me like a wrecking ball all at once, all the emotions all at once.
Infertility is so emasculating.
It's made me more aware of how I feel about what's important to me.
I think I tried to escape from it a little bit.
I suppose, buried my head in the sand and thought, it'll happen.
I probably, like most men, didn't want any help, didn't want it, couldn't accept any help.
Probably didn't cope very well with it, just buried it down, I think.
I can't think of one aspect of my life that's the same now as it was before the diagnosis.
Men are as much part of this as well. Why don't we say something?
Get ready for an absolute disaster. It's Have You Seen? Hello everyone, welcome to Have You Seen? This week we are talking a disaster movie and about the producers of some disastrous movies. It is Airport 1975 and Electric Boogaloo, the wild, untold story of Canon Films, which is a heck of a mouthful. I, as always, am Kieran Disaster Lefort, which makes him Tom Movie Webb.
Hello.
Well, you've made a movie and I'm generally a disaster, so...
Yeah, okay, I think that's a very fair
about fair.
Yeah.
Any important notes before we jump into it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, why not just crack straight in, I think.
Okay, well, I've had a change of microphone, which hopefully will be better than the old £7 jobby I used to have. And I've only had a chance to test it once. So if it's good, brilliant. If it's bad, I'm sorry.
It looks pretty swish.
It does look pretty swish, yeah. It doesn't need a pop shield, and I can...
Wow.
You know, took seconds to set up as opposed to minutes for the previous one, so...
Yeah. Mine probably should have a pop shield, but I just, the aesthetics of it look better without, so...
Fair enough. Slave to the aesthetics.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I don't know if they were slaves to the aesthetics or not, but Menahem Golan? Yeah, Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus were the two men behind Canon Films, which were a schlocky production house, I guess, in the 80s.
Well, I mean, were they even... I guess they were a production house, weren't they? They were a distributor, really. Were they?
Well, no, they made stuff as well. They were end to end because they ended up owning cinemas. I remember the Canon cinema chain in the UK.
I think that's what what we're getting to here is what makes them so unique is that they did not fit into the Hollywood models at all.
No, they did not. They are, however, the subject of Electric Boogaloo, the wild, untold story of Canon Films, which is a documentary by, I really should have written down the director's name, which is about the story of these two crazy Israeli cousins who came to the US around the late 70s, early 80s, and purchased Canon Films, which was an existing studio, and proceeded to churn out every shitty 80s straight-to-video action movie you've ever heard of. You will, at the very least, have heard of Masters of the Universe, the movie, starring Dolph Lundgren, and Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Death Wish 2 through 5. What else did they make? They were going to make a Spider-Man film at some point. I think they made the live-action Captain America before Marvel got the rights back. Yeah, the cheap Captain America film in 1990, I think it was.
Yeah, did they make? They didn't do the 70s Spider-Man movies, did they? The late.
They were
like the one in Hong Kong.
They were TV movies.
Yeah, okay, so probably not then.
So no, they did actually make theatrical pictures as well.
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot were theatrical, weren't they? I mean,
but I think outside the US, a lot of them went straight to video.
Yeah, I can see that. I wrote a list of the ones I've seen.
Yeah,
that they went over in the film.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at like a proper back catalogue of their things, but just about the movies that they mentioned in the film, I was surprised at how many I've seen.
Because you last week when I mentioned them, you were a bit, I don't know who these people are, and I said you've seen at least one. You've seen Master of the Universe.
Yeah, I remember the Golem Globus, I remember Cannon, and like, so I know of it, but I didn't know much about them per se. So looking at it now, I had seen King Solomon's Mines, Delta Force, Over the Top, Master of the Universe, Superman: The Quest for Peace, and there was another one as well, but I can't remember which it was.
Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo.
No, it might. I think I've seen. I have seen one of the Chuck Norris ones.
Okay. One of the missing in actions.
I think it's one of the missing in actions. I suspect it might be the second one because it was rubbish.
Right.
And the
the second one
which was actually the second one.
Yeah,
exactly. So so that's what I'm pretty sure I've seen one of those. I have a feeling I've seen other movies they made as well. I can't remember if they made Megaforce or not. But
it's not mentioned in this doc anyway.
No, it's not.
I will say now, I have no notes about the actual film itself, about the documentary. It's all about the people, the stuff they made. And I think this actually, I was thinking about it today, this actually reminded me of when we did Supermensch, The Legends of Shep Gordon.
Yes.
That this is a film that the subject matter is much more interesting than the filmmaking.
Yeah, and I think...
Because it's just a standard Talking Heads documentary. It is edited incredibly fast and moves at a hell of a pace. What I would say is that, like, the format is a fairly standardized format, but it works very, very well, and it's cut very, very well. So it's well made. And everybody has a story about these people.
Exactly.
And they're not afraid to tell it.
Yeah, it's just not one of those things like Senna or...
no.
Or what was the other doc we did? The Imposter. It's not like those documentaries that kind of did something a bit different with.
No, they were cinematic. Part of that cinematic documentary kind of craze, if you like.
Exactly, and it's one of those things with documentary filmmaking. You've got to make sure that it's the right format for the subject matter, and I think just letting people tell these stories is exactly what this needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's not a bunch of no names. There's people like Elliot Gould, Bo Derek, John Frankenheimer, like people who've actually been something in the film industry have got Golem and Globus stories.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that they had the time to do it. Like, you could approach people like that, and even though they might not have had the best experience of it clearly was such a unique experience.
Yeah, it might just
I don't know whether it would be fun, but it's like it still motivated people to want to take part in the documentary.
Yeah, but the documentaries ended up fun.
Yes, that's true.
But I think a lot of the stories are, finally, I can tell the truth about these bastards.
Yes, I agree with that.
There are some people who obviously hated them. The guy from MGM obviously hated them. The woman who sets fire to her own the video set of her own movie, obviously hated them.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see why. Like, I mean, it's one of those things that you can't take away from what they managed to achieve just by sheer force of personality in some regards. But not particularly likable people by the sound of it. They definitely seem like the sort of people that if you're on their side, if you're part of their clique, you're
I think it's
treated
all about
like a king.
Yeah, I think it's all about wavelength, because Franco Zeffirelli loved them.
Yes, absolutely.
Like he called,
that's because he got. It's interesting because the filmmakers got creative freedom loved them.
Yeah,
the stars who were treated badly, or particularly by the one who directed
Golem.
the movies, Golem, like Shelley Winters. Was it Shelley Winters? Having massive rows with him.
Oh, everybody had massive rows with him.
Exactly, and he
the
was
row with Elliot Gould is hilarious.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just like he clearly comes from that school of directing of you do as I say, and you and pushing actors almost kind of like Kubrick to an extent of that kind of manipulation and not even possibly borderline, but abuse of people to get what they want out of it. I mean, there's a story of him pointing a machine gun at a pilot, making him fly a plane that he was too tired to fly, and all of that kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, that's that's taking this too far.
Yeah,
You know.
but I like the story, the reverse of that, which is Barbet Schroeder taking a chainsaw into their office and threatening to cut off a finger for every day his movie is held up because they're not giving him money, and they're like, no problem, have your money.
Yeah. It seems to be like there's a definite. You're right. There's a definite type of person and a definite wavelength that connect with them. Not so much the Hollywood types.
No, people who have been treated and paid well so far would like to continue to be treated and paid well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as I mentioned last week, so they are responsible for launching a lot of like people and crazes of the 80s. So like there was an 80s craze for ninja movies, and Cannon started that. Chuck Norris took off as a movie star in the 80s. He'd done a movie with Bruce Lee in the 70s, and he'd done a few like martial arts movies, but they then put him in what at the time were big action pictures, and made him a star. Jean-Claude Van Damme got one of his first leading roles, and got to edit his own movie. Under
crazy.
them, they introduced the craze of breakdancing to the mainstream in 1984 when it was an underground like New York movement. They introduced the Lambada. I remember as a kid the Lambada craze hitting the UK, and they were responsible for that.
Yeah, and I was in primary school.
Separately,
when that
because
happened.
they split up and made two separate Lambada movies at the same time. One of them had the rights to the song The Lambada, and the other one had the rights to the word The Lambada.
And what I loved about that is it was always about beating the other movie to market.
Yeah.
So when there were other breakdancing movies, or if there was a Lambada, they would have to be first. And one of my favourite bits at the end is the very end of this, where there's a title that comes up and says, we asked them to take part. They said no. They made their own documentary and beat us out by 3 months.
Yes.
And it's just like, that is
it sums them up.
Them, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting. Like, I'd say this movie is 80% Golan. Like, Yoram Globus is the background man because he's I think he's the smaller personality, and he's the money and the business, whereas Golan was the movie and the flash.
Yeah, absolutely.
But together they had personalities that worked.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A bit like us, really. You're the quiet one and I'm the noisy one.
Yeah.
And it seems to have worked for about 20 years so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. And it's like they introduced this, essentially this concept, like having this model of funding a movie by selling it before you've made it.
Yeah.
Using international sales, and then recouping that on a domestic US box office.
Yep.
We
have reviewed a movie that was made like that. So do you remember when we did Juan of the Dead back in season 1?
Yeah.
So I discovered that when I went to the 2010 Cannes Film Festival, and I interviewed the director, and he had a big stand. He had a big booth at the Cannes Film Market and loads of promotional items. And he's like, yeah, we've written a script, we shot a little trailer, and next year we're going to make the movie. And then a couple of years later, the finished movie came out, and that's how it was made. He had a concept and a trailer, and he pre-sold it and used all of that money as his film budget.
Yeah.
So it was still even like, I imagine it's still going to say, even 10 years ago, it was still common practice in that low to no budget range.
Yeah. I mean, I think people do still do that, and I mean, obviously now you've got the addition of things like crowdfunding. It kind of takes that to the next level, essentially getting your fan base already up front to pay for the movie.
Yep. We've reviewed a movie like that too, which I kicked money into, Lazer Team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and and then obviously with all the streaming services like Prime Video and Netflix and Hulu, and God, there are hundreds of them now.
Oh, they keep cropping up. Like subscribing to them all costs you more than an old cable bill used to.
Exactly, and that's I saw somebody say, actually, have we just reinvented cable?
Yeah, pretty much.
By doing that, and that's again a completely new model, which started off almost like that direct-to-video market where they would hoover up loads of stuff, but now with the originals, that's changing again. So
it's direct to Netflix now, and
and it's difficult to keep up with that, though, the way these markets are shifting. So I feel like you're never going to, well, maybe you will, but people like them are never going to have the success that they had even
No.
though they didn't have a huge amount of success.
Unless
I mean,
unless you own your own streaming platform, which
Yeah,
only like the big budget people
Yeah.
like, Disney and Netflix and Amazon
Mhm.
do. I mean,
Yeah,
there's things
yeah.
like Shudder, which caters to horror, but I don't think they
Yeah.
make original content.
no, not as far as I'm aware. I don't really know how their models work, and
No.
you know,
I want an 80s Hong Kong one that's just full of like
yeah, that
Corey Yun movies and
yes,
all the old crap that Summer Hung used to churn out in the 80s.
yes, that would be really cool. Actually,
Yeah.
I'd subscribe to that for
Yeah.
a couple of months.
Can someone bring back Hong Kong Legends and have them set
Yeah.
up a streaming service?
That's a great idea.
Hmm.
Absolutely great idea.
Shit,
But
turn
yeah.
the mics off. We might need to talk to some people.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like it's funny, but I think making movies now is easier than it ever has been before, with cameras being
Yeah.
way cheaper than they used to be. Like all the production equipment is getting
Mm.
cheaper, and seemingly you've got a lot of places you can put stuff now. So making the movies, I think, is becoming very easy. Distributing them and getting them in front of people is becoming easier. Making the money
Yes.
still is the hard bit and isn't really happening as far as
the
I can see,
actual practical
Yeah.
like shooting and putting together of a film is easier than it's ever been. Like, can you imagine how much stuff we would have made of teenagers if we'd have had iPhones in our pockets?
Oh,
Like,
exactly.
Every
Yeah.
kid today is carrying around a film studio in their pocket, whether they know it or not,
Yeah.
or whether they're interested in that or not.
Yeah.
And the platforms are there for them to just distribute this stuff now.
Yeah. I mean, you
Um,
just have to see you see like groups of kids in various countries in Africa who are using mobile phones to remake action movies. And
Did you see
like-
that remake of the Extraction trailer, the kids
No,
from
I haven't.
Nigeria? It's amazing. I'll share it with you. It's
Okay, please do,
amazing.
because I've seen a bunch of stuff and it's just like, oh wow, like they're really taking on board like how the shots are framed and how the stunts are done, and it's just like, okay, anyone can do this.
It's
right
only
now.
because it's the only difference is they have wheelbarrows for cars.
Yeah, exactly.
But apart from that, though, I think when it was easier back then, it was like if you were part of that system, like they say in there, like there's a guy says, today's January the 14th, you're shooting on March the 7th, here's $700,000, go and make me a ninja movie in 7 weeks. Like, imagine being given that freedom.
Well, yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Pressure, but fun.
Yeah, exactly. And, it might get recut by
Yeah,
and
exactly.
reshot by Golan afterwards, but
Yeah, there was a movie that one of the ones that I hadn't seen that I thought actually looks kind of interesting. I'd quite like to see that.
Which one
was Runaway Train.
Yes, that's on my list too. So there's 3 of their films that I want to see.
Okay, what are the other two
Ninja
that you've
3: The
got?
Domination,
Oh,
which is a
wait,
combination
that
of a ninja
Exorcist
movie,
Ninja?
The Exorcist,
Flashdance. Yeah, I wrote that down. Yeah.
and Life Force.
Oh, that's on Netflix, I think.
Yes, it is, and it has kind of like even beyond this, it has kind of like a cult legendary status in sci-fi circles because it is just so balls to the wall crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those movies when you're browsing and you're thinking, I want to watch something I haven't seen before, so maybe a bit cheesy from the 80s. And it comes up, and I always hover on it and think, this.
I think it shows up a
and
lot on
then move
Netflix because it fits in every single genre at once.
Right, okay. Yeah, maybe one day I'll watch it. But yeah, that's
maybe we
popped
should
up
do
quite a
it.
bit. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Just sight unseen. We'll keep it in the back pocket for a fallow week.
Fair enough, okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else to say about it because there's not much to talk about with the film. It's all about the subject matter.
It is, yeah. I think
I am tempted to call this episode "Would You Fuck This Monkey?"
Yeah, okay. That's perfect.
That'll probably get taken off iTunes immediately.
Yeah, absolutely would. I think something that's really interesting is how like Michael Winner comes out of this so badly.
Oh yes.
And I mean, he was.
I called him a rude name last week, but good lord.
Yeah, he never came across as a nice guy or that anything like that. I think people kind of got won over by him when he did the car insurance ads.
Yeah, I think
here.
so too.
But just not a nice man. But I can see exactly why him and Golem hit it off.
Yeah,
I think they're 2 peas in a pod, those two, in the way they treated people. But but yeah, it really kind of highlights that Winner seemed to really sort of get off on the violence and the...
Particularly towards women, like the misogyny part of it was just repellent. He's an awful man. Yeah,
it really, really is. And I've only seen the first Death Wish, and that kind of had a, that's got some merit to it in terms of its message. Well, not necessarily maybe in its messaging, but in the subject matter that it deals with. And yeah, looking at these things, it's like he's been given license to go into the really dark and nasty stuff that he gets a personal kick out of. So yeah, it didn't kind of make me want to watch those, because I've always kind of thought, I'll probably watch the other Death Wish movies at some point, because I know that 3 is supposed to be really ridiculous and it might be fun to watch them. But actually, this has really sort of put me off those.
Yeah. No, I have I don't think I've ever seen a Michael Winner film, and I really don't want to.
No, have you not seen the first Death Wish?
No.
Okay. The first Death Wish.
I always like the gag in The Simpsons. Death Wish 7. Ugh, I wish I was dead.
Yeah. You should. You should watch the first Death Wish. I think it's worthy of watching. But yeah, the others definitely not. And I think the only other movie that might be kind of fun to watch is the Lou Ferrigno Hercules. Because I do have the note.
We've already done one awful Hercules movie.
I know, and I just this kind of looks better.
I wasn't entirely sure it wasn't the same film, to be honest.
Yeah, at first, yeah. But then
they look like they had the same £3 budget.
Yeah, well, he fights a bear, but I think Lou gets to throw him into space.
Yeah, but does the bear throw a left hook at him, like the one in Hercules, New York, who clearly had some boxing training?
These are the questions that need answering. That's why we probably need to watch it.
You're going to sink this show. Is there anything else we need to cover? Do you think it's worth watching? Do you think this documentary is worth watching for people who are interested in films and people who aren't interested in films?
I think it's definitely worth watching if you're interested in films. I think it's because
particularly if you're of our age group, I think, who will have seen things like the He-Man movie and that kind of stuff, and has that is probably one of their better films, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely, it is by the look of all the others.
So, an aside, but an attached aside. There's a documentary on Netflix at the moment called Power of Grayskull, which is about the entirety of the He-Man franchise from its creation.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a section in it where they talk about the movie. And they've got Dolph Lundgren and they've got Frank Langella. Frank Langella loved playing Skeletor.
Okay.
He absolutely loved it. Even spending 3 hours putting the makeup on every day. He really loved playing that part because he got to go nuts and be like a Shakespearean nutcase in a skull mask.
Nice.
But the bit I remember is the one of the stunt guys who also played the bladed villain, who I think was just called Blade.
Right. Yeah.
He had a nickname for He-Man's sword because it was so big. He called it Buick Slayer.
Nice.
Anyway,
sorry. I think I've seen the. They did a Toys That Made Me or whatever it's called.
Yeah, the Toys That Made Us, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that one on He-Man. But the thing that I wrote down, which is a quote from a guy, he kept getting billed as a music supervisor, but apparently he was also a script editor or some kind of
I think it was one of those cottage industries where once you were through the door, you did whatever they asked you.
Yeah.
Or you didn't have a job the next day.
Yeah, it's... He said a Golden Globus film completely resembles something minus taste.
Yeah, I wrote...
That pretty much sums up everything.
Yes, the one I wrote down was what they didn't have in taste, they made up for in enthusiasm.
Yes, yeah, that's, again, that yeah. So I think it is definitely worth watching if you're interested in movies. Outside of that, I'm not sure. Because I think it's what becomes very apparent and interesting is just the way they went about it in terms of the industry and how that's changed now.
And the sheer amount of products they pushed out.
Yeah. But, you never know.
They were Asylum, but they weren't knowingly making shit. They were Asylum, but thought they were good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were kind of like the next Roger Corman plus.
Yeah. They're the bridge, aren't they, between Roger Corman and Asylum, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, there we go. That's Electric Boogaloo.
Mm-hmm.
And we never explained the title, really, but it doesn't really matter. Everybody knows the phrase Electric Boogaloo, right? It gets attached to every possible sequel going. It's that or Die Harder are always the joke, sequel subtitles. So moving on, I guess, to Airport 1975.
Yeah.
Which I will let you recap.
Okay, so I pitched this just because I knew it would be reviewed on episode 3, and we did Airport on episode 3 of season 1.
Did you not put any more thought into it than that?
No, I did. I pitched it just because it's one of those movies that it's clearly a huge influence on Airplane, and it's kind of fun to look back on that. It's also one of those kind of classic disaster movies, like those. I think I always refer to them as Sunday afternoon movies, where you can put it on, and it doesn't necessarily matter if you're paying that much attention. You can walk away for half an hour.
Apart from for this show where you have to write notes for it.
Yeah, of course. You could walk away for half an hour and come back and still know what was going on, sort of thing. Those kind of movies. And I always kind of like that kind of thing on, like, you just put on a really long movie that you could do that with. I think this one's just shy of 2 hours, though. The basic premise of it is a 747 is doing its usual flight, and it gets hit by a light aircraft, hit right in the cockpit, and
which sounds painful just when you say it.
Yeah, and takes out all 3 of the crew. 2 die, and then the captain's essentially sort of blinded by injury.
Blinded and only able to speak 1 or 2 important words at a time.
Yes, that
autopilot on.
Yeah.
For example.
And it leaves a massive gaping hole in the side of the cockpit.
Conveniently large enough to fit Charlton Heston through.
Exactly, which becomes a plot point later on. And the air stewardess basically has to learn to fly a 747 mid-flight.
Yep.
And it's ridiculous, and it's exactly what you want it to be and what it is. And it's, there's a whole bunch of less so than the subsequent one, but you've got Charlton Heston and George Kennedy and Gloria Swanson kind of slightly plays a variation of herself.
Well, she's credited as herself.
Yeah, and
the same, and they do that gag with Airplane with God, I can't remember her name. Somebody who was like the same kind of era and star power as
that's right.
Gloria
Is it Myrna
Swanson.
Loy?
Ethel Merman.
Ethel Merman. That's it. Yes, yeah. And oh god, Linda Blair is the young girl.
Linda Blair, Sid Caesar, who would go on to be like a big deal in comedy. Jerry Stiller, Eric Estrada, who would then star in Chips in the late 70s and early 80s, is the flight engineer. Yeah. I wrote down the cast as they appeared on screen, and like the font just kept getting bigger and had more exclamation marks after them because I couldn't believe all the silly names that were in this film.
I know, and it's one of those things. That's kind of what's sort of fun about it, is that you just like, oh my god, that's so and so, and they have like a bit part, or and it's it's just a fun, big, silly, dumb disaster movie, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's it really. What did you make of it? Was it not your cup of tea?
Much like Smokey and the Bandit, it's both great and shit at the same time.
Yes.
And a little bit underwhelming, but that might just be my 2020 eyes.
Yeah, I can see why. Yeah.
Like, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it felt smaller scale than it needed to be.
Yeah.
That's when I found out it had a budget of $3 million. And then made 47 million just in the US. So it did all right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of, it continued and consolidated that franchise.
Yeah.
And it's, it's funny because it's one of those films you just kind of, like, I say, you just put it on, and it's almost like a background movie these days. But you can see how, like, people would have loved it in the cinema at that time. Even though the rear projection is awful.
Oh yeah,
and like,
but some of it's really good. So like all the exteriors of the actual plane are really good. Like all the aerial shots of it. I found out that plane cost them $30,000 a day to rent from American Airlines.
Yeah.
All the exterior shots were shot in 2 days.
Yeah.
apart from the evening taxi and takeoff shots, they were being shot as it was being delivered before they officially had permission to film it.
Amazing.
And the plane was still in use until 2005.
What? That's
it got
crazy.
refitted as a cargo plane and was in use until 2005, and then it finally got scrapped in 2011.
That's quite common.
Bear in mind, this was shot in 1974.
Yeah. I mean, those planes do go for like 40 or so years, and because I mean, the 747 was still fairly new at that point. I think first flight was 69, I think. So, you know, it was quite a big deal to get that aircraft. And it's
still a big deal to go on one now.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
it's the jumbo jet, isn't it? It's like it's a legendary aircraft.
Yeah. I guess the only thing that compares to it now is the A380, the big double-decker Airbus.
Yeah. And I've been on a 747, but not an A380.
Same here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of iconic, I guess, in that way. And the like you're saying about the exterior shots, all those exterior shots were the ones that were reused for the episode of The Incredible Hulk.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that last week.
Yeah, which is just amazing.
Yeah. You can see all the bits Airplane spoof before they even happen. Like I've got a list. Like the note above that says: child, nuns, drunk comedians, movie star, kidney patient, a dog, a horny crew, filthy old women, guitar.
Yeah, it's all in there, and
I watched this yesterday morning, and then last night when I went to bed, I put on Airplane because I just had this compulsion to watch it. And like, if you didn't, you could probably chop them together and make one serious movie.
You could, absolutely.
And like, you could swap parts about and people wouldn't realise, people wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think Charlton Heston's opening line is somebody says to him, "How's
I am serious and don't call me Shirley."
No, somebody says to him, "Oh, you know, you're back. How was Europe?" And he just goes, "Yeah, still there."
Yeah,
and it's just and you're just like, "Oh God!"
I've actually wrote down.
Sets up the tone.
I wrote down a whole load of quotes.
Oh, really?
You really want to sail a 35-footer all the way to Hawaii? Is that a problem? No, if you have an all-girl crew. My first mate wouldn't dig that. Why not? My first mate is my wife.
Again, it's got a very 70s attitude towards women. But
does. Which led to one of my favourite lines, which is before that, where Charlton Heston and Karen Black run into each other in an airport because he's what is he? Is he a pilot? Is he still an active pilot, or is he just like a consultant with the airline? Or
no, I think
because she's an active stewardess.
Yeah,
she's the woman who flies the plane.
Yeah, I think he's kind of like either a senior pilot or he's slightly above that. He's like kind of a consultancy sort of person.
Yeah. And they're in a relationship and they run into each other in an airport, and like he wants to go and have it off, which is a phrase that needs to make a comeback, by the way. And she's like, pretty much, no, I wanted to talk to you to dump you. Mentioning they've been together for 6 years, and she says, I'm tired of one-night stands. If you've been together for 6 years, that is not a one-night stand. That's not the meaning of that phrase.
No. What I do quite like about this, though, is there are those very 70s attitudes toward women, particularly like Eric Estrada's character and stuff like that. But all through the film, Charlton Heston's actually trying to tell her that he loves her and that he wants to progress this relationship.
Yes.
And also,
I've never heard the word honey as much as I have in this film. No. He says it, he calls her that every other line.
Yeah. And there's the other thing is that it's like they even though the men are like that, the women are quite kind of they're quite strong in retaliation. Like they don't necessarily do things, but it's the women that kind of have to come through. Like it's the stewardess that have to sort out the plane. So that, you know, with the exception of Charlton Heston sort of coming to the rescue because he's the lead, a lot of the actual response to the danger is dealt with by the women on the plane, and I think that kind of comes across quite well and works really well. But you're right, there is a bit when Charlton Heston and George Kennedy are following the aeroplane and watching it, and Charlton Heston just watches the movement of the plane and goes, "She's flying it. Fly, baby, fly.
Yes, yeah, I wrote that down.
Amazing.
There's so many. There's a great line which I should have used to open this show, which is once again, skill and daring have overcome fear and anxiety.
I love the character of Petroni as well. Which is George Kennedy. He's the only character who is in all 4 movies.
Yes, and I have a note about that.
Mm.
His wife changed his name, and he loses 4 children between Airport and this one.
Amazing. My favourite line of his is he's on the phone hearing about he's relaying the information about the accident, and he just goes, "Oh, it's not a big deal. It's just a big hole where the pilots used to sit." Slams phone down.
Yeah, despite not being one, he's the prototypical angry police captain, isn't he?
Exactly. But the thing is, he says that his wife and child are on the plane.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh, okay. I would, you wouldn't joke about it even then.
I need to take issue with some stuff around Linda Blair's kidney patient.
Oh, right, yeah.
So she's laying there. She's put on the plane and she has to recline for the flight. And she very lightly strums the neck of the guitar with her fingers. And her mother is like, "The doctor says you must lie very still." I'm like, she moved her fingers. You want like dancing? They filmed the guitar like it's haunted.
Yeah, well, yes. So,
like there's a ghost is going to come out of the guitar and kill the pilot.
So the reason for that MacGuffin is that it's supposed to signify there is a vibration in the plane that shouldn't be there.
Right. Yeah.
Which they never really make very clear.
No.
But
And
sometimes it will just look at the guitar and it will just go. But
Yeah.
they've instead of the guitar making that noise, they do it with the score. So
Yeah.
it's just like a sinister orchestra. So it's like a haunted guitar.
Yeah, it's a haunted guitar. Speaking of the haunted guitar, the nun gets her hands on it, playing an acoustic guitar on a packed night flight. Fuck you, nun.
Yeah, it's
Also, they constantly talk about there's 120 people up there. You can get 400 on a 747 and you don't see one empty seat.
No. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? They just want to make it sound bigger, better, get it all, it's...
Yeah. The actual crash is hilarious. Like, I laughed out loud at the... So, we called it a Cessna, and it's not a Cessna.
No,
it is hang on, I researched this.
Okay. Is it a Beechcraft or something?
It's a Beechcraft Baron, yes.
Oh, there you go.
Which apparently was destroyed in 1989 when, you won't believe this, it collided mid-air with an actual Cessna.
You're kidding.
Nope.
There are a lot of, I think some crazy proportion of air crashes happen in those little planes.
Yeah.
I think mostly because they're owned by
idiots,
fairly normal people. Like they're not,
I was going to say rich fools who just do what they want to do and don't pay attention to the laws of the sky.
Yeah. They just they tend to be people that they don't do it for a living necessarily. It's actually just a mode of transport.
Yeah,
like the guy that gets killed in the plane.
Who reminded me, for some reason, of Gil from The Simpsons. You know, the salesman who can never make a sale?
Yes, yeah. I think he's a bit like Glengarry and Ross.
Yes.
Jack Lemmon, and I think it's that kind of that person.
I'm going to single out something I really liked.
Okay.
So a character turns up called Purcell, who's the newsman.
Right, yeah.
And he arrives at the airport. Also, this movie shifted from being about, this franchise shifted from being about airports to being about airplanes really quick, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Because there's not
that's where the action is.
I know. But they're not flying an airport, are they?
No, exactly.
An airport is not about to crash. So this guy, Purcell, newsman, turns up at the airport because he's reporting on the story of the Cessna hitting something. He doesn't necessarily know about the jumbo.
Yeah.
And there's a shot of him doing a piece to camera on a runway as a helicopter lands in the background. He runs up, tries to get his interview with the crew, and they go inside the airport and they do all of that in one shot with the helicopter starting completely off screen. Brilliant. Loved it. I was actually hoping they would do the same in reverse when the crew went back out to get on the helicopter, and they can't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess, and that's one of those things that when you get great shots like that, I guess it's usually down to the fact that they've literally got one shot at doing it. Or very few shots at doing it.
Oh yeah, like to reset that has got to be a massive pain in the backside, and the timing on it is perfect as well. It's so good.
Yeah.
Some things I didn't like were things like the stewardess having a normal conversation with Salt Lake radio tower with a massive fucking hole in the cockpit and her hair not even moving.
Yeah.
Lots
some
of
that
people
stuff
just wander in and out of that cockpit as well.
Yeah, well, you have to. It was a lot.
I know.
I mean, the first time I went on an aeroplane, I got taken to the cockpit to see what it was like when I was like 8 years old.
Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah, I know. But I mean,
cheap airlines.
Well, you could just do stuff like that. Then it was, that was in late 80s. So it's a different, very much different world we live in now.
Yeah, very much is.
I think if they remade it now, Tom Cruise would be Charlton Heston, and he
wouldn't need such a big hole.
And but he would actually do that stunt.
Yes,
they would actually put a hole in a plane and they would drop him through it. Like no questions.
They'd redo the cliffhanger stunt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's I think some of the stuff they do, some of the exterior shots of that stunt look really, really cool. With like the guy hanging from the wire and the stuff like that. It's a shame.
Yeah, that was the stunt coordinator whose name escapes me, but he's a big deal in the stunt community and has been for like 40 years or whatever, more longer than that, I guess.
Yeah. It's a cool idea for a stunt, and I guess like today, you would it would either be CGI'd,
And on the subject of that, they managed to make a helicopter landing and taking off a major event, whereas in a modern blockbuster, it wouldn't look as impressive with a dozen helicopters, and they would all be CG anyway. Yeah, and simply because they had one real one.
Yeah, you've got to remember though, this is 1975.
Yes, I know.
And helicopters have only been about for 20 years, 25 years.
I guess so.
Because they, the first ones were early 50s, very late 40s. So like the, helicopters were a big deal. That's why they.
I don't know much about the genesis and development of the helicopter.
No, they kind of just.
It went. Leonardo da Vinci had an idea. It sat on a shelf for quite some time, and then helicopters appeared.
I think the first time they were actually properly used would be Korea, and the little scout helicopters, the two person scout helicopters,
the whirlybirds.
Yeah, and then obviously like Vietnam and all that kind of stuff, they became more and more prominent. But yeah, so like I think civil helicopters were still quite a big deal by that point.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things in the trivia that came up for this that I wanted to hit.
Okay.
Charlton Heston, George Kennedy, the DOP, and one of the producers had to run back and forward between this and Earthquake, which was shooting at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
And Charlton Heston claims in his book he did his final shot on Earthquake and then started this 15 hours later.
That's crazy. Have you ever seen Earthquake?
No.
That's a ridiculous film as well.
All right. Well, that's that.
Oh, hang on. There's a crying child. We might have to just wait a second.
It's the perils of doing this at home, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's only if she invades that we have to cut.
Can you hear her at all?
I heard a little wail, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's fine. We've had all sorts of... But when we were in a soundproof studio, they had all sorts of background noises invading, didn't we?
That's true, yeah.
Here's a hypothetical for you. Is Die Hard 2 Airport 1990?
Oh. Yes. That's a great... I never even thought about that.
It suddenly occurred to me today. Yeah, that's actually based on a book called 58 Minutes.
Yeah.
Which I read because because they reissued the book with the Die Hard 2 like video cover on the front of it, and I read it as a child. I think I was reading Die Hard 2, and then I saw the movie, and I'm like, hang on a minute.
Yeah. No, that's a really good shout, and it's funny.
Yeah, imagine if that had been part of this franchise instead of the Die Hard franchise.
Wow. My wife loves the airport movies, and she also loves Die Hard 2. So.
There we go. Well, she's a plane maniac anyway, isn't she?
Yeah, she does like her planes. And now we're right under a flight path. It's brilliant.
It's very easy to keep her quiet. Yeah. Something we used to do that I kind of wanted to bring back was alternative titles and great taglines. Okay, so in France, it's called Airport 75 pretty much everywhere, but there are some places that is subtitles. So in France, it's called 747 in Peril.
Nice.
And in Germany, it's Giants in the Sky.
That's a great title. That's really good.
Yeah. But the tagline is terrifying. The tagline is in quotes, and it's "Something hit us. The crew is dead. Help us, please. Please help us." That was on the posters for this.
That's like the bleakest interpretation of this movie.
Yeah, and it makes it sound like it's like a dramatization of a real event as well.
Yeah,
like that's what I would think. Like this is a quote from someone who was actually on the plane.
Yeah, no, yeah, right. It does. Yeah, it makes it seem a bit more gritty, and this one I think tries to be a bit lighter in its humour than.
I think so too.
Airport.
There is a lot of humour in it.
Yeah,
like there's the actor who's like trying to point out that he's in the in-flight movie, which is American Graffiti, by the way.
Yes, and he just has only taken the flight to see himself in that
the movie, and then the print breaks before it gets to his scene.
Yeah.
And they do humour. Like there's the old woman who says, "I feel queasy. I'll have a bourbon with a beer chaser."
Yes, the Boilermaker. Yeah. So there's a lot. I think they introduced that a lot. I'm trying to remember if there's a lot of humour in the third one.
I can't even remember the first one, to be honest. I meant to go back and listen to our episode because I don't remember anything about it. But I do know that I quite enjoyed this in that Sunday kind of way.
Yeah. I think that's what these movies are. You know, it's that kind of thing. And the third one, I think, is an even more ridiculous scenario and even bigger named stars. So
yes. And then you said like the Concorde one is
that's just
utterly bananas.
Yeah, that's almost like Canon have taken over the franchise.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, it's quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because like there were points where it felt dragged out. I'm like, there's not enough story for a movie here. Like, it felt like I wrote it should be an episode of MacGyver where they have to figure out how to get him onto a damaged jet.
Yes,
and
absolutely,
then I looked, and I was shocked there were only 10 minutes left.
Oh right, okay.
So it both dragged and sped by at the same time, which was nuts.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that it's all about someone's gone, that's a great plot idea, and then it's just like, but it's supposed to be an epic disaster movie, so it's got to be 2 hours. Let's stretch it out, because it's 40 minutes in that the plane doesn't hit it until 40 minutes in.
It's actually dead on 40 minutes in where the collision happens. There's a lot of setup beforehand.
Yeah, which I guess there is in Airport as well, because Airport's quite a slow pace like that, because it's all about the onset of the storm, isn't it? So it's a bit of a slow burner, and you get to learn all of these massive sprawling characters, which they don't. There's a lot of character set up, but it's in a much more confined space, so it takes a little bit less time, I guess.
I guess I can sum it up as enjoyable bollocks.
Yes. Yeah, that sums up the entire
it's
franchise.
utter crap, but I actually had quite a good time watching it. It's fun. It's fun.
That's exactly what I hoped. Marvelous that you would get out of it. Yeah.
Righty. Shall we move on to pitches for next week?
Yes, absolutely, we can. Yeah.
We're going to flip a coin. See who goes first.
Yeah. Go on in. Have you got a coin?
I haven't got a coin.
No, I don't.
But I do have my notes.
What have you got?
I am pitching you. So previously, we have discovered that you have a blank spot when it comes to anime.
Yes, I do.
Like Japanese animated movies don't go in your head at all.
No.
So we've done Studio Ghibli's Porco Rosso, which is one of my favourite films, and you were a bit, it's all right.
Yeah.
I have found for you, I'm wondering if it's the Japanese thing, because I found for you the most Studio Ghibli film not made by Studio Ghibli.
Okay. All right.
Song of the Sea.
Right. I don't think I've even heard of it.
It's an Irish animated film,
right?
From 2014, I think. And I saw this on a plane. It would have been not long after that. And just, I don't understand, and this is going to be the test for you, I don't understand how anyone can't adore this, not even on like just a pure aesthetic level.
Okay. Interesting.
If you say anything bad about this film, this show is cancelled.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Interestingly, I remembered really liking it, but I hadn't actually seen it again until this weekend,
Right.
when it came to writing the pitch and my notes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty much just going to give you the premise.
Okay.
After their mother's death, lighthouse keeper Connor lives with his children Ben, who's about 10, and Saoirse, who is 6 and mute.
Right.
After finding Saoirse washed up on the shore one morning, their visiting grandmother takes the children away to live with her in Dublin, leaving behind their beloved dog Coo. They get sent to bed early on Halloween night and then escape from grandma's house to set out home or at least find their dog.
Okay.
The quest becomes a bit more urgent when Saoirse becomes sick on the journey after the revelation that she might actually be a selkie, a magical creature from Irish folklore that lives with a human on land and a seal in the sea.
Oh, okay.
And that her singing a specific song, the Song of the Sea, can not only save her, but many other fantastical beings of Ireland.
Oh, okay. Intriguing. That seems like it takes a bit of a dramatic turn.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah,
I might have spiced that up a little bit to give it an air into like 2 separate paragraphs. It winds together a bit more than that earlier on.
Okay.
And it's just it's a really nice story. The animation style is so pretty. It looks like a children's picture book come to life.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know, there's the Twitter account, Every Frame a Painting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's this. Every frame is a painting.
Okay.
I mean, like, it literally is. Like, this is hand drawn. There are a couple of CG elements, but it was largely hand drawn.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yeah, I loved it. It's wonderful. It's just so nice.
Okay. All right.
I think you can. It's one of those films you can show to absolutely anyone.
Okay.
I think your daughter, even at the age she is now, would probably find something she liked in it.
Okay, that sounds intriguing because, like you say, animation. It's a weird thing I have, particularly with anime. So this will be interesting because obviously, since I've had my daughter, I've watched a lot more animation than I might normally.
Yeah, I bet you have.
And there is, there's not much of it that I don't like. So it'll be interesting to see if it is a specific Japanese aesthetic that I find difficult to kind of engage with. There are certainly things that she watches that I'm less interested in than others. But,
how much Peppa Pig have you had to watch?
None. We don't do Peppa Pig. No, because if you watch it, Peppa Pig is actually a absolute horrible little cow. She's just an awful person, and
I haven't seen enough of it to know.
We just didn't like her attitude, as a character. We just don't think it would be a good influence on our daughter. So we don't do Peppa Pig. We do other things instead, like Bing, which she loves, and it's a lot more. It's a lot nicer. Yeah. Peppa Pig just seems to be a little shit and get away with everything. And it's just like, well, I don't want my daughter to be like that.
And there's the title of this episode: Peppa Pig is a little shit.
Yes.
It's only slightly better than Would You Fuck This Monkey?
Right. Okay. So my pitch. I am going to pitch you an Ealing comedy. I'm trying to think if we've ever done an Ealing comedy before on the show.
Now there's a question.
I'm not sure we have because I think we've probably seen quite a lot of them, and it just occurred to me
I don't think I have seen quite a lot of them. The only one I can actually think of is The Lady Killers.
Okay, right, all right. So I'm going to pitch you a film called The Man in the White Suit, which is a classic Ealing comedy. It's probably actually not as comedic as The Lady Killers, certainly, but it is another iconic Alec Guinness lead. It's the essential plot is there's a guy played by Alec Guinness he's like a biochemist who is obsessed with trying to create a synthetic material that is indestructible and never gets dirty and never kind of falls apart. Okay. And he gets jobs in sort of textile mills in the Midlands and tries to conduct these experiments, and they inevitably end up getting him fired. So until he finds a way to get himself entrenched in one of the mills where he can actually conduct his experiments, and they kind of get behind it. then it kind of almost ends up becoming a commentary on industry and how industries need to survive, and it's surprising.
Right.
It's surprisingly timely. Like there's a lot of stuff now that's still like you watch this and you think, okay, this is always going to be a problem with mass large scale industry.
Yeah. It's like the kind of the 1950s version of the Apple built to fail conspiracy.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
But there's some comedy along the way. The thing that I think really stands out about this, it's not, like I say, it's not as comedic as some of the other Alien comedies, although there are some funny moments in it. The script is very good. It's very tight, and it actually got nominated for an Academy Award for its screenplay. It's the sound design and the lighting.
Okay.
They're the things. It's almost noir-esque in its lighting. The guy who's cinematographer on it is someone you will be familiar with, and that's Douglas Slocum, and he did Indiana Jones.
Okay.
And do you remember we watched?
Right.
Do you remember we watched the black and white version?
Yes. Yeah.
So you will see how close this looks to that.
Interesting.
And some of the stuff he pulls off with the lighting, I still don't understand how he did it. I can't. I've been trying to look it up. I've been trying to research it. There's stuff he does.
Have you been practicing?
No, but there's stuff he does making a particular suit look the way it does. And I've been trying to figure out how he's done it. But you'll see when you watch the movie.
Okay.
And the sound design in particular, the sound effects were like the first of their kind. The sound effects of his apparatus, but sort of bubbling away and stuff were engineered in a very unusual way, and I'm pretty sure have been reused over and over and over again for any kind of laboratory or biochemical process. I'm pretty sure they turn up in Willy Wonka's and the Chocolate Factory, and so there's a lot of that sort of stuff that's kind of interesting within it. So yeah, it's kind of something I think we should take a look at, and it would be fun to look at from a filmmaking point of view as well as like a socio-political point of view in a weird way. Yeah.
So it seems like we're in for quite a nice and gentle week next week.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I guess it's time for me to do the usuals then.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
If you have seen Song of the Sea or The Man in the White Suit, or in fact any of the films we have talked about in this run, let's discount the season 1 because that's way too many films to get into. If you've seen any of the stuff we talked about in season 2 so far, you can get in contact with us on Twitter at HYS Podcast. We also have Instagram, which is also at HYS Podcast. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/haveyouseen. The website is haveyouseen.net, and the email address is hyspodcast@gmail.com. I do have that all written down, but it's not here. It's there, and I can't see it while I'm looking here. I think I got all that out. Let me just double check the note. What are you shaking your head for?
Nothing.
I can make you do it.
No, it's fine.
Hang on. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, website, email. The other thing we have to plug that's fairly important is Tom's feature-length documentary on the male perspective of fertility treatment. It is called The Easy Bit and is available to rent at on Vimeo, vimeo.com/on-demand/The Easy Bit. And new for July 2020, available to rent on the Amazon Prime video platform. So it's not included with your Prime subscription, but you can rent it on there as well as on Vimeo.
Yeah, I think.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's available for rental on Prime Video. It's the official line.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's there as well.
You can do that bit next week.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can be in charge of plugging your own shit.
Fair enough. One thing I will say, I've been doing some polls on Instagram stories. Based on on the movies that we've watched in that episode. The most interesting one I did was, if you could watch one movie tonight, what would it be? Smokey and the Bandit or About Time?
Yes.
What do you think the results were?
I have a feeling it's going to be 100% Smokey and the Bandit.
No, but I thought it would actually be pretty 50-50. It was 78% Smokey and the Bandit, 22% About Time. And interestingly, though, when I asked, is Smokey and the Bandit a good movie? Got 100% yes. Is About Time a good movie? Again, it was about 70-30. And that surprised me. That's
interesting.
Yeah, I always thought, okay. So I'm going to try and do that for every episode. Do a couple of polls on Instagram stories, like a couple of days after the show goes out.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's an insight into our listenership, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Smoking the Bandit all the way.
And that seems as good a point as any to end it. We'll see you next week for Song of the Sea and The Man in the White Suit. Goodbye.
Bye.